We'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with some introductions. Let's go ahead and start with those.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Nicole Brooks, CFR. Beta Sigma chapter was initiated in the fall of 2011. Played the tuba, and I majored in history and minored in art history.
Okay, hi guys, this is Justin Jensen. I'm from the Beta Kappa chapter, rocking the NCD, and what else did you say? You said your initiation date and whatnot, spring of 2014, and I was also a tuba player, and my degree is in film production.
I did not realize you guys both played tuba.
The best. That's why
it's a blessing and a curse.
Isn't it?
It is.
I am Jessica Lee. I am your National Vice President for Colonization and Membership. I almost said Student Affairs. That's weird. It almost just rolled off my tongue. I was initiated in fall 2003. And I played the percussion. You don't have to give me that look down there. I see your face. Bong's in the bottom corner of my screen, so he thinks everything I say is funny tonight. I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for a 3A school district in Central Texas.
Yeehaw.
And I oversee CFRs, so that's why I'm on the call. Was never one, but I get the awesome privilege of working with Nicole and Justin. And then I will get to supervise the next two CFRs as well.
Fantastic. And my name is Bong, VPSA, and your friendly host tonight, moderator, whatever you want to call me. So again, the questions, and this is awesome because I don't know if we've ever done this in the past, but this is a chance for me to learn about this as well, and I'm glad to see so many familiar faces on this call. Something that I will ask is if you are taking notes or whatever, if you could share that with us so that we can compile something together for future use, and maybe put that into social media posts for people to view in the future. That would be very, very helpful. And the last thing here is we'll be sending out a survey just to kind of get your feedback on the call to see how we can improve moving forward. Sound good? Great, awesome. All right, so for our CFRs, what is a chapter field representative?
So a chapter field representative is both a member of the headquarters staff and sort of a member of the National Council. Our primary job is to travel around and visit chapters across the country. When we are not traveling, we are working at the headquarters office, mostly answering phones and assisting the staff with what they need help with.
Sweet, thank you. Justin, anything to add to that?
Oh, you pretty much nailed it. You kind of get to see both sides of it. I just got on my trip today, so I'm in a hotel right now, and Nicole's
and I'm in
the office where we would be when we're not on the road. So
Sweet.
Nice visual representation too.
Awesome, I love it. Great. So, you went into a bit of detail about what are CFRs, and I think an important thing that a lot of students may not ask is, why do we have CFRs? Why are they important?
Yeah, I'll field that one. For me, it's definitely, I think it's getting to have people go out there and kind of have interaction with some of these other chapters. Not a lot of chapters kind of get an interaction from people that are either coming from national headquarters or from any of the national leadership to kind of interact and work with chapters on kind of ways where they have strengths and they're places that might need improvement as well. So it's kind of a good way so we can learn about the great things that our chapters are doing, but also give them the interaction and the help they may need that they don't normally get, because usually they're just kind of having the talk with themselves, but having an outside source is kind of really beneficial. And when you get a bunch of these chapter visits done, you get a lot of different experiences and a lot of different ideas that you can kind of just take and spread around to other chapters who may have not thought of something like that in the future or in the past or just kind of any of that. So it's just a really beneficial way for us to know about chapters and for more kind of interaction and spreading of ideas.
Nicole, anything to add to that?
Nope, sounds good.
Awesome. Great. So, this is a question. Well, the next question I'm going to ask you is a question that I hate being asked myself, but I'm going to ask it anyways. When it comes to CFR life, what does a typical day look like for you? And who do you work with on a day-to-day basis?
So that really depends on where we are. So if we're in the office, we work with the headquarters staff. So TJ, who does he's our education coordinator. Robert is our graphic designer and media specialist. Debbie is the membership services coordinator. Di is the national accountant. Aaron does everything, and pretty much. And then Steve is the national executive director. So 8 to 5 in the office, Monday through Friday. Like I said, mostly we just answer phones. And we'll get work done that we have, that we need to get done when we come back. So we write reports, so we'll work on reports or putting our schedules together in the office. Typical day on the road, it depends on the day. So if you're traveling, you're obviously just driving to where you need to be. You could have a reporting day, which means you are compiling a report from the previous day or the previous visit that you had. And then on a visit day, it depends on each chapter, but I've been on a visit that's hours. I've been on a visit that's 12 hours. So typically visit days take the entire day. Typically meet with the director bands, the sponsor, most, if not all of the chapter officers. And then I typically have a chapter meeting. Sometimes there's marching band rehearsal or concert band in there. Or other social events, depending on what the chapter has going.
Awesome.
So it's varies.
No, I totally get that. Justin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no. I mean, when it comes to the chapter visit days, those are the ones that kind of vary the most, because unfortunately we can't necessarily let chapters pick the days we come, because we have to get so many chapter visits in. So we let the chapter kind of decide what our day is going to be. So kind of what works for them during the day and the schedule. A lot of chapters can't meet until later in the night. So sometimes you're waiting so you can meet with the whole chapter, or just kind of hanging around campus for most of the day. But it does vary. It changes based on either how many people are in the chapter, or basically what needs they might need if they need more time.
You also, you do get to create your own schedule, meaning when you have an off day, when you do a reporting day, when you do a visit day. So on the off days, you are free to do what you would like. So since I like art history, I typically try to look for an art history museum or something to do. So when it's a free day, you have that time to do what you want.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. So just to kind of dive into some lingo here, something that I didn't know before I stepped into this role was when we were, as a fraternity, when we refer to a quarter, what does that mean?
Like the semesters, or like the quarter schools, or?
Yeah. So when we're looking at the biennium, in a business, when we're looking at a year, usually we're looking at 3 months. For us, we just finished our quarter one reports, at least for the national officers and Steve. And that's like 6 months, right?
Yeah, it's typically a period of 6 months. So it'll go from January to July, typically.
Okay.
We have our summer council meetings. And then July through the next January. Quarter.
So in that quarter, how many chapters do you tend to visit, or do you try to visit within that quarter?
Justin?
Basically, it kind of really depends on how many you can get in the certain amount of time. That might actually fluctuate depending on just how many you could fit. Like this spring, there's a district convention season, which you're going to a lot of district conventions. You're kind of having to plan around those things, so it usually kind of fluctuates. But I've usually, this whole time, I've kind of fluctuated between around 25. Usually I visit 25 chapters a semester, barring, depending on if chapters have to cancel for any reason or stuff like that. So usually that's kind of around your normal semester, but that may change by the time that you guys get into this position if you accept the job.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So, within that time frame, we're looking at these different quarters. We just finished our quarter one, and a part of your role is to sit on national council meetings. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, with that being said, what is your role in the meetings? What do you guys tend to do? What are your takeaways from being a part of that process?
We're a non-voting member of the council. We don't vote on matters, but we're there to provide some insight, particularly when it comes to chapters. Our input is welcome on subjects too, if we feel that it's needed.
Yeah. And we also usually kind of report on any specific chapters that might be in more need of kind of help based on situations. But since you do visit a lot of different chapters, you're going to start noticing that these chapters are all kind of either struggling with, or maybe they're all doing well. And usually we like to kind of report those to the National Council during the council meetings when we're a part of them.
Yeah. Awesome.
And Nicole and Justin do a really great job too of, so as CFRs, you do write a report for the quarter. All of the members of the council have to write a quarterly report, and so does the chair of the board of trustees. And then Steve is our executive director, and then Nicole and Justin also write a report. And they do kind of report those trends. One of the things that we had them do this time around is create a list for us of chapters that we might want to sit and visit with at conventions, chapters that might just need a little bit more help and assistance. And not only did they create kind of this great, like, hey, these chapters really might need some help, these chapters maybe not so much, but also kind of gave us notes about their experiences on their visits. I would say that our CFRs are our boots on the ground. What they have to say is really valued. We value them as part of our council meetings, but I think that's a piece that people don't quite realize when they accept the CFR position, that you are privy to a lot of that information and those discussions and stuff like that. So that's kind of another piece of the job, is you do attend those council meetings. And that includes any of our video calls as well. The CFRs sit on our video calls too.
Great. So, looking at you guys were talking about a little bit about your chapter visits. What do they tend to look like? And I know you mentioned that they may last different time periods, but overall, what does a chapter visit look like? How many days do you usually spend there? Who are you meeting with? And really, what components are really important to those?
So with those, basically, there's kind of a structure to it. So for a chapter visit, usually we will send out emails like before the beginning of the semesters, informing them of the visit and giving them a link to these forms that all of the chapter officers will fill out, and that kind of gets sent to us. We try to have them sent to us a couple weeks early, as soon as the chapters can get them to us, so we can kind of read about these officers, then kind of assess, okay, where does each individual officer that we meet with kind of need the most help? Have like, okay, this officer maybe had more questions, so I'm going to set more time aside to let them kind of ask their questions and work that through with them. So a lot of the preparatory work that the chapters do kind of really helps and informs the visit, so we're able to actually do what we need to do when we're visiting them. So like Nicole mentioned, we visit with we meet with all the chapter officers, the director of bands and sponsor, if those are two different people. And then we do a full chapter meeting. Now, some chapters will schedule things in between, either like maybe a social event, getting lunch and dinner with them. If you're a chapter that is getting a CFR visit, just don't forget to put lunch and dinner in there. That happens sometimes, and I like to eat sometimes. Anyways, that's kind of what the schedule will look like. Sometimes I've been given campus tours and kind of seeing like what the student life is like, which is sometimes beneficial because it kind of gives you a better idea of what they have available to them and kind of what's going on there. But having those meetings throughout the day, and those are basically in whatever order that the chapter kind of decides that Hope that kind of covers some more of the question.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, like with that being said, as a, let's say a new person steps into the CFR role with, especially at the beginning, with all of these moving components, all of these different aspects to a chapter visit, what are things that you tend to have to focus on to really get a good feel for a chapter? Because I mean, someone new coming in, that's a lot to process. So what things do you tend to really focus in on during these visits?
Yeah, and that's something that I think every CFR learns early on. You kind of start learning how visits go and what you like to do, what chapters like to do. Something that I try to do is focus on what the chapter wants to talk about or what the chapter really needs help with at the time. It's not that, and we do want to acknowledge the positives on a visit because those are important, but we're there to really provide resources and to provide some advice, whether that be from our own experiences as brothers or from where another part about the job is we get to take things that we learn from chapters and bring them to other chapters. So we kind of get to steal ideas, but we give you credit for it as well. So I try to focus on the areas that people need help, especially in a chapter meeting. We try to get to as many questions as possible in that chapter meeting.
Sweet. Love it. Awesome. Thank you. So, when I'm assuming that when you are heading to your chapter visits, you're not just going in cold. I'm assuming, you like to be prepared. You like to have a little bit of information on these chapters, their history. How do you prepare yourself for these visits?
So yeah, there's a few different ways that you can kind of prepare for it. So if you back up all the way to before you even go out to a visit and before you even go out on a trip, headquarters has archives and records of previous CFR reports that you can go into review and see what kind of they were struggling with then or what kind of strengths that they had then. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it might not be helpful. I mean, you as chapter members know that your chapter has probably changed a lot in 2 years. So usually that could be something that helps or not, but that's one way that you can kind of learn about a chapter before you even get any of these forms that I was mentioning earlier. The big thing is definitely getting those forms from the chapter officers and being able to review those before you go into the visit. So that way you kind of have an idea of where you want to go with it. Sometimes if we don't receive forms from the chapter, then it's really kind of hard and you have to spend most of the time just kind of learning about what a chapter officer does. Some people have a different variety of what their chapter officers do. Usually some of the like president, VPM, those are going to be pretty similar, but after that, honestly, it kind of varies on what different chapter officers have. So having that information and reviewing that is kind of what I like to, what really helps me, and I know it helps Nicole too. It's really kind of where we get most of our information leading into it.
Okay. So
yeah, and we can use the OMRS as well. Sometimes you can go in there. It lists a chapter's discipline history. You'll also know that if a chapter has been recolonized and maybe they're in the younger stages of that. So that also helps to know when a chapter was colonized. So, if you're talking to a chapter that's 100 years old or a chapter that's 5 years old or 2 years old, sometimes it's a different experience. And then it's important to note that sometimes the forms don't always come in on time and you don't always have all the information like Justin said. So sometimes you can be a little bit flexible or kind of figure it out.
And also before we even kind of start putting our schedules together, we do research on how many people are in this chapter. For those of you that's like there's going to be a big difference between a chapter of 5 and a chapter of however many Alpha Zeta has right now, because I think they have like a small army, so that really kind of changes the focus of the visit and what that chapter is probably going to want to talk about and work on. So shout out to Alpha Zeta. But those are kind of like the things that we kind of do to kind of get prepared for it. So
okay, awesome. So we have a question in the chat here, and you were kind of talking about like setting up your schedule. Is there like a particular order that you visit in? Do you just go down the list? Do you go by distance? Talk us through that.
So there's a couple of factors. When it comes to a district like the West, this distance, you typically try to group those together so you don't have to go out 17 hours to do things. So geography plays a part in some of it. We try to visit chapters at least 2 years. Sometimes we push it out to 3 or 4, depending. Sometimes it's unintended that it gets pushed out 3 or 4 years. And then the other thing is a need basis as well. So if a governor reaches out and asks for a chapter to be visited, or if we notice that they're struggling, then we'll plan a visit, and sometimes we'll go back the next year to just check in and make sure everything's okay.
Okay.
Really working with the VPCM and the governors and the rest of the council as well to kind of determine who needs one.
Okay.
That was one of the things that when I came on, because the neat thing is the way that our election cycle works. Nicole and Justin have been CFR for a year, so they kind of trained me on their jobs and what they do. And we had a little CFR retreat that we did because I only live currently 5 hours straight south of headquarters. And so they drove to my house and we spent a few days together just talking about the position and what it's like and stuff like that. And so for me, a priority was if we have a chapter that's on probation, or if we have any of our newer chapters, I really wanted those chapters to make sure that they got visited. And then just based on what we're hearing from governors, kind of those chapters of concern. So with regards to that visit schedule, it's kind of a combination of concerns plus who needs a visit, and Nicole and Justin have done an excellent job of setting up the next set of CFRs because we kind of know where those visits are going to be in the fall. So building that first schedule is going to be a lot easier for those first set of CFRs because we kind of know what parts of the country we already need to go to.
Yeah, and it is very, very much on purpose that CFRs come in on a non-national convention year, because that would be a lot of stress really quick, especially this being all in Stillwater. So it's kind of a great cycle of like the CFRs can onboard the new VPCM, and the VPCM can then go on to onboard the new CFRs, and it kind of just works like that, which is really helpful. But yeah, so what else was I going to add? Yeah, sometimes it's just as simple as geography, if it makes sense. Like you kind of don't want to leave some spaces open. If you miss a few chapters, that means you're going to have to come back out there. But sometimes it's also as simple as the weather. I would hate to have to cancel a visit because I got stuck in several feet of snow. So usually, like, we'll try to attend to, like right now, this time we'll try, like I'm going to the North and South Carolina to kind of try to avoid inclement weather. So I'll start with a state where it's warmer, a little bit less bad weather, and then going to somewhere else when it gets better in the spring, more north.
So basically, you're just never going to visit the Midwest.
I literally, that was my first trip.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
So I know you guys kind of mentioned, when CFRs come in, do you just serve a CFR until you don't want to anymore? Like, what's the time limit?
So CFR serve for 2 years. You are hired. We were hired, I think in May, and then we started around the first week of June, and our term will be up at the end of May 2020.
Okay. So going back to that time when you first started, throwing curveball here at you. So what would you say was your biggest struggle once becoming CFR?
Yeah, it's quite a curveball there, Bong.
Boom.
Justin, you want to start?
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, it comes to the moving, but you'll be able to figure that's a ship that you can jump on later. But the kind of thing that was the biggest kind of thing to acclimate is just kind of like you this whole first summer to kind of just get acclimated to the headquarters office, meeting the people, learning how to answer the phones. You're going to do that real quick. Kind of getting acclimated to your computer that is provided. It's a laptop, so it'll have information on there that you can access and look through, organizing stuff. And it's basically, that was kind of the biggest thing. And then there's some stuff around town that you have to do to get kind of acclimated and whatnot. Like you have to go get an Oklahoma driver's license. So those are just some of the things that are kind of starting out. I mean, at first it was just kind of like learning about, okay, where should I start? Because the big thing, I would say at first, is just kind of getting acclimated to headquarters. And then once you kind of start doing that, then you can start working on like, okay, how do I kind of create my first schedule? What should I be looking for and whatnot in those kind of chapter visits. So it's very well set up in the fact that you get time to kind of figure it all out. You don't get just thrown in.
I think one of my biggest struggles is you're super excited, you come in, and then you kind of realize that the part of the job is representing the fraternity. When you go out to these chapter visits, you are a representative of the National Council and the fraternity, and sometimes you have to think that you know everything because you're going to get a lot of questions, and the appropriate answer is I don't know if you don't know. So just remembering that you're learning too, and you're going to learn things as you go along. And Justin talks about getting used to answering the phone. That's really daunting at first because you're like, oh my God, they're going to ask me a question I don't know. But I found that's the quickest way that I learned, because in people asking me questions on the phone, I learned a lot, because I'd be like, hey, Aaron, what do I do for this? Or hey, TJ, what's the answer to this question? So I think the biggest thing was just kind of the daunting fact of I'm going to be asked a lot of questions and I have to feel like I know it all. And the truth is that you won't know it all. I still don't know it all. So
retweet. So no, that's awesome. So thinking about picking up your life to move to Stillwater is pretty okay, I guess, for some. So like, tell us about.
Okay.
I was like, is that the fun?
Nobody's gonna say. Okay.
Okay, so living in Stillwater, how is that? Tell us more about how, good old Stilly.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. It's a nice place to live. It's kind of it's a quiet town, but at the same time, it's still a college town. Like there's plenty of restaurants. We're about an hour and 15 minutes away from Tulsa and Oklahoma City. So there's stuff to do. It's not a ton of like touristy things to do, so to speak, in Stillwater, but I think it's a nice area. But it is, if you live in a large city, it's going to be, you're like, oh my gosh, small town. Some getting used to maybe, but it's also kind of nice. It's nice. I think at first when you're a CFR, you're like, I'm in a new place. Takes a bit to get acclimated. I was kind of ready to go on the road because I was like, I don't know anybody here. I'm okay by myself on the road. And then you get on the road and you kind of start missing the people back at headquarters and like more time in Stillwater. So
yeah.
I think it's more rural than people realize.
Yeah, it is
because it is not like, if you drive to Stillwater, it's not like, hey, get off at this exit and all of a sudden here's the campus. Like a lot of college campuses are. It's like, get off at this exit and then drive like 15 miles,
forever.
depending on what exit you get off at. And it is rural central Oklahoma. And so I think that that's a little bit, you're kind of surprised when you see that. But Stillwater it's weird when you have the opportunity to live close like I have. It's like coming home every time you come back because you start to learn the restaurants and things like that. And we do our summer meetings in a non-national convention year. We do back at Stillwater. So for the leadership, we usually come back for that. And so since national convention was at Stillwater, we had almost all of our meetings last biennium all in Stillwater. So we spend a lot of time back home. But I think that that's something that's definitely a little bit surprising, is that there's stuff in Stillwater, but if you want to do some of the bigger things, you've got to go to Tulsa or Edmond, which is fairly close. Nice town too. And Edmond is really nice, or OKC.
For me, it's like it's the perfect kind of size town, because it is a smaller town if you're from kind of a city area, but it's definitely not so small a town where it's like tumbleweed and then you look at your phone and you don't have any bars kind of thing. No, it's kind of got like the perfect amount of everything. Like if you're somebody who's more familiar with like some like chain restaurants and whatnot, Stillwater has that, and then it also has its local flavor that you can kind of go and check out. So I think it's kind of like it's like a perfect town. You don't have to deal with the traffic, especially during the summer when all the OSU students are gone. So.
And it's an easy town to move to, especially if you're not used to being away from home, not used to being on your own. It's an easy town to move to. It's not super daunting and crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. So, you know, when we're looking at, you know, having to live this life that I'm assuming is, you know, coming out of college or, you know, coming from wherever you're coming from and then going into this job where you have to balance, you know, HQ, you have to balance being on the road, you have to balance all these different components. In your opinion, what is the most important skill or trait that you believe a CFR should have?
Justin?
I definitely, skill or trait, I think it's definitely just kind of be ready for kind of anything. Life in this job is not necessarily always going to be consistent, because that's just naturally how it is. Sometimes you're in Stillwater for a couple of weeks, sometimes you're on the road for a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of is always changing and whatnot. So having a skill, just kind of being ready for anything, taking advantage of times where you're back at home, take advantage of like being social with all those things, because sometimes you're going to be by yourself for a bit. So just kind of being ready for anything, be a good thing to keep in mind when you're on the road, because it is different. It's different from any job that you have had or probably will have. So that's something that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and time management is a big one. You're on the road, you know, you're coming out of college where your professors are telling you, you know, this is due this date, this is due that date. Like I said, you create your own schedule. And then people skills. You learn how to interact with a lot of people. You start learning some empathy and how to approach different people in meetings. I'm a pretty person, but I have to remember that I can't be that way with everybody. So I think time management and people skills.
I think one of the things that I've told people just from having hosted many CFRs in my home, and just talking with different CFRs is in some aspects, I think you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you're constantly interacting and meeting people for the first time. You never know what situation you're walking into, whether somebody is upset with us as an organization, somebody is upset with somebody in particular, the chapter is having internal issues. You just never know what you're walking into. And so, or you could be walking into a great visit and everything is great. And so you do have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, but then also knowing that as the VPCM, that position has your back 110%. So knowing that you have that person that you can text or call saying, hey, I need you, I have a question, or there, you know, we have a situation here, or not sure how to deal with this, or this was phenomenal, I can't wait to tell you about this visit, or these are the great service things happening here. Or I remember one visit, Nicole said, you know, this chapter has a mental health chair, and it was just awesome what they were doing there. And so you get those highs and you get those lows, but I think you just have to be one of those people that can come in a situation, kind of like Nicole said, those people skills, but knowing that there's going to be times where, whether it's the situation that might make you feel uncomfortable, or maybe the way somebody approaches you, just knowing that oftentimes as the CFR yourself, they might not be upset with you, but sometimes you're taking the brunt of that. And then other times, you know, in the case of poor Justin, he gets mistaken for Justin Chesick, who was the previous CFR. And so there's always
have that problem in here right now. So.
There's always, you know, you just never know. And I think that's the beauty and the curse of the job, is that it's always different. But then at the same time, if you're one of those people that sort of likes that kind of predictability, that definitely would not be this job for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 2 questions. You want us to get to those?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go to the one about holidays. When it comes to holidays, do you get time to go home to see family, your chapters, or do you stay on the road for holidays as well?
Yeah, so the fraternity actually pays for us to go home for Christmas, or I should say the holidays. So typically the CFRs, we've traditionally gone to Midwest Clinic, which is a conference that happens pretty much the week right before Christmas. Andrew knows what he's talking about. But the fraternities will pay for you to go home and see your family for the holidays. The fraternity did help us move out here as well in terms of compensation for that. And as far as holidays on the road, like I will be spending Easter on the road, but that was my choice. Sometimes you do have to spend holidays on Halloween's always, typically is going to be in the middle of your visits unless you plan on being back in Stillwater. Thanksgiving, the fraternity will allow time off for that, but that's not paid for. That's on your own dime. But like I said, Christmas is paid for. We had Martin Luther King Day off that was yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday. We get Memorial Day off. And then the office typically shuts down for about 2 weeks, give or for the Christmas holiday.
And we are also, like, as someone that helps supervise, so Steve is your boss, is the executive director. The national VPCM also helps to supervise the position. And so just using Nicole as an example, she had a wedding. Her sister got married.
Yes.
And there, at the time, there was a professional conference that we do attend, a Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic in Chicago, which is in December, right before Christmas. And we also currently attend TMEA, Texas Music Educator Association Conference, which occurs in February, right around Valentine's Day. And sometimes we attend some other events like Honda Battle of the Bands and HBCU Band Directors Consortium Conference or CBDNA Athletic Band Conference, just kind of depending on when those dates fall. But typically our CFRs do go to at least TMEA Midwest Clinic. The wedding was right around there. And I told Nicole, that's crazy for you to fly, all your families together. That's where you need to be. So we're also very understanding. If you have a death in the family and you need to go home, we're going to send you home. If you're sick, stay home and stay. If you're on the road, stay and take care of yourself. If you're in Stillwater, same thing. We understand life on the road is hard. We try to do our best to take care of our CFRs. The great thing is that you have this awesome network of national leadership around the country that are all very willing to take you in, feed you a home cooked meal. If you come visit me, my children will definitely use you as jungle gyms and adopt you as their own. And Jack will usually cook a delicious dinner for you because he's the cook in this house. But no, really and truly, there's people across the country that will try to give you that break and take care of you. But we try to do everything that we can, just like you would in a normal job. If you need, time off to be sick or a death in the family or those typical holidays, we make sure that happens for you.